telephone line. And after I was initially trained in the Edgar Casey tradition, and as I share in my book, Prepare for the Landings, when they took me on board physically in '79, when a group called the Psychops specifically targeted me, the psychic assassination, and actually literally killed this physical body, and they only had to beam me on board the ship. They brought me back to life, altered my DNA, RNA. That's a whole other story. But so I could do these transformational channel readings. And so that's one of the services I provide. But the thing that I wanted to say is the thing that Elohim are concerned about, the Federation of Light, is the possibility that the Cabal will be able to succeed in creating this false flag. Well, in this channeling, as I mentioned, that I received from Ashtar that's posted in my channeling channel for the masters.com channel material section about this crashed UFO that came down. And what was being explained was that because of the frequency shift, when anything is designed to operate in a way that will manipulate or fool, manipulate us as they've been using technology for so long, these kinds of agendas, these kinds of technologies are going to ultimately break down, will atrophy, because they're not in harmony to the sacred principles of the universe. So while the government is attempting to set up and stage this ultimate plan of theirs, what Ashtar was saying in the channeling is that he was saying that ultimately these agendas will not be successful anyway, but it's still up to us. He always mentions this about our personal responsibility, that it's also up to us to reach out and ask them to intervene on our behalf, and that we can also, in a sense, sponsor the rest of humanity. Because we know that the higher self of humanity, all these other souls scattered throughout the planet, they don't want to be fooled. They don't want to be manipulated. And I know that in the biblical, scriptures where it talks about the elect will be fooled. Now, that could be interpreted a number of different ways. And I know that when I tuned into this, and I was told about this, that when the Council of Nicaea met in the late 3rd, early 4th century, which, of course, represented the power elite, just like the Warren Commission on the Kennedy assassination, just like the 9/11 Commission. These are always set up by the power elite, who are connected with groups like the Tridal Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderbergs, all these groups that are connected with the power elite, who have economic, political connections, and who've been bought and paid for, basically. And they are told and ordered, present this particular outcome, and this is the conclusion, to suppress the real truth, the real facts, as much as you can. This has been going on for ages. I'm just giving a few examples. So the Council of Nicaea was specifically set up to manipulate the information in the time of Jesus, put a spin on it. Now, the truth is still there, but just a lot of religious dogma and fear and historically being manipulated to suit this agenda. Because it's always been the organized religion, organized political, economic power brokers, and sometimes they work together in various different ways. So it's been an agenda to manipulate the sources of information that we have access to through the normal means of school, education as used to sociologically program us. But nevertheless, the truth is still there. And so as we develop our discernment and our cognitive deductive reasoning, we're able to tune in to the manipulations of information, both historically and what's going on right now. We start drawing to us information because our consciousness, universal mind, and our heart and our mind connected together, will draw to us magnetically all of the sources of confirmation, higher forces, God, other individuals from the military-industrial complex who are, again, coming over to the light right now, that are blowing the whistle. All this is going to be drawn to us and is, in fact, right now being exposed, brought out in the light of day. And so I became aware for a long time about various sources, talking, as I said, to people retired, and but going back to the fact that I remember sitting and being in the council prior to incarnating in this light, beaming into my mother's womb. Literally, I remember leaving my immortal light body in storage and literally beaming down, and of course being born and growing up the normal, quote, normal human way. But I wasn't born with the cosmic amnesia veils over my mind. So I have all this memory of the things that we discussed in the councils. And my mission was to prepare humanity ultimately for divine intervention. And how there would be a series of waves that, unlike the emergency evacuation of Atlantis, the Federation of Light would be far more organized now. There was a lot more ships in guardian action now than there was in previous times. And the reason of doing a series of waves was to make sure that people would first be lifted up, that were more attuned to it. There was responsibilities and missions called for them. And eventually the masses of humanity, they were getting off the wheel of karma. They would be allowed this time too. That not one soul would be unaccounted for. Because in Atlantis, remember, there was an emergency situation. It happened very quickly. There wasn't time to publish books or prepare humanity. But I also knew that and this was discussed, that the power elite would attempt to fool everybody by trying to imitate, duplicating technology. Of course, their ships are like Model Ts compared to the Jaguar and Maseratis flying around up there. That's a bad analogy, but a much higher level of technology. And so this whole thing about trying to fake an alien invasion or even a fake rapture kind of thing, if they would go to that extreme, the only thing they can duplicate is technology that looks a little bit similar to the more advanced Federation of Light. The Federation of Light is far more advanced Merkaba, light ships, consciousness vehicles. They can duplicate part of the black technologies, but they can't duplicate the higher consciousness that the real beings of light they're existing in that state. You know, that's why if we go back to the 50s, and there were some, the researchers who tried to put a spin not only to initially suppress or ridicule contacts, or they tried to say, well, it might have been the government when the Space Brothers, quote, the human appearing ETs that came incognito on Earth. They tried to, come up with the theory that maybe these were just government agents that were fooling the contactees. But when you're in that state and you're around these kinds of beings, you can't fool a person. When a higher being has come to Earth incognito, they bring a consciousness with them. You can feel the love. You can feel. And when I was taken aboard physically twice, I can tell you that in the environment aboard the Merkaba light ship, not only the ship itself was like a living conscious entity. You can feel the love, the light, the incredible energy of consciousness that this consciousness technology exists. Was a part of, and the beings themselves. Incredible amount of love and feelings of fellowship and oneness, of self-realization of that state, that cosmic consciousness state that they exist in. And I was privileged to, for a short while to be there with them, as I remembered also prior to this life. So that's the one thing that the government cannot duplicate, is the conscious, because if they could duplicate it, they would be in that state. And then they wouldn't be part of the disinformation, the things that they're doing. So that's the thing that many of, these people who think, well, they can fool humanity, as humanity's waking up right now, you can't pull the wool over people's eyes like you used to. That's the whole thing. There are a lot of us now that didn't just get off a turnip truck. We've been around, we've been to Earth many, many times, and it's been brought through channelings many times, and Ashtar and the different beings have said this, that, that we've developed what is called a cosmic street smarts. Being on planet Earth, that we've gotten cosmic street wise, and because of being here so many lifetimes, and we can gauge, we can tell, that, well, again, they might try to fool people with a certain more advanced level of technology through the black off system, but they cannot fool us because they can't create the same energy and consciousness that real cosmic beings of light exist in. That's a key point that's never been brought up often when they think that people are theorizing how if it happens, if there is a ship suddenly appearing over the Earth and it's just a false flag, well, the one thing that they couldn't duplicate is an energy of love, of fellowship, of beauty, of joy, that the Federation Light, that's their energy. So, yes, they might fool people temporarily a little bit, but getting back to this thing that Ashtar was talking about in this channeling, that as the days pass, as the weeks and months pass toward 2012, it's going to be increasingly more difficult for the power elite to stage and pull off. And this kind of thing, with this case of the ship crash landing in California recently, and the civilian witnesses to it, and then the channeling we see from Ashtar, what he was talking about is that this is an example of there's going to be more and more of these crashes, more and more of these ships that they're attempting, that they will plan to use in a possible faked alien invasion scenario, will not be able to function. That it will actually won't be able to operate under the higher frequencies that are beginning to flood the Earth. So in the older timeline, according to Ashtar, they did succeed. They did succeed to partially fool by staging a little, temporary kind of thing, but they don't have the number of ships of the Federation. That's literally millions of ships in Guardian action right now. So it would be a very small thing compared to the vast number of Federation light ships that would fill the sky. And again, they couldn't, as I said, manufacture the energy. But for some people who still look at it in a mundane way, there are others, of course, who have become quite vocal. And so just recently, this was an email, a response to reports about the possible false flag plan that the government would like to stage. And it was written by Stephen Greer. And I thought that it was quite insightful. It's kind of long, but I wanted to read it. because I do feel that he really does have a positive intent, though there's been some question about what his real allegiance is, since he's been around so many whistleblowers, insiders, and some of the government giving him opportunities to access certain information. Some people have wondered, is he really truly coming from a space of sincerity because of various things that seem sometimes contradictory. And I don't like to judge people, but I like to think the best of people. And I believe that this letter really does give a really strong sense of where he's coming from, even though there's still questions about some other things he's done. I think for the most part, I think he's coming from a really high desire to get the truth out, despite being maybe sidetracked or getting distracted at times in various different agendas of people he has connected with. But I think the letter does sum up, and I think it summarizes a lot of other things going on. So I want to read to you right now, and I'll make comments about it as I go along, possibly. And again, this was actually, it was actually originally posted, I just realized, in June 2002. But I think it has relevance since it was again brought forth, repeated again, because of the significance of what he said back then and as it was right now. And it's interesting because it refers to the false flag on 9/11. And it's true. Had somebody been told that prior to that, there would be a lot of people who would be skeptical. And, of course, when 9/11 happened, Ashtar told me, when I saw the second jet hit the trade building, and I didn't know what was going on, and Ashtar pops in and he telling me that they had just beamed up, actually physically beamed up most of the people from those buildings, and then proceeded to give me a little history lesson, referring back to how the Nazis burned down the Reichstag building as a tactic of using fear. And then he blamed that on a group of communist terrorists. There's always some extremist group that the power elite can utilize as an excuse to take away our rights and freedoms, right? And create fear and uncertainty. So it's very interesting, and other things I received. And let me quote it. It says, "Imagine this. It is the summer of 2001, and someone presents you with a script for a movie or book that tells how a diabolical terrorist plot unfolds wherein both 110-story World Trade Center towers and part of the Pentagon are destroyed by commercial jets hijacked and flown into those structures. Of course you would laugh if you were a movie mongol or book editor, rejected out of hand as ridiculous and implausible, even for a fictional novel or movie. After all, how could a commercial jet being hijacked on radar, being tracked on radar after two jets had already hit the World Trade Towers, make it through our air defenses into the most sensitive airspace in the world, and in broad daylight on a crystal clear day, slam into the Pentagon? And this is in a country that spends over $1 billion a day to defend itself. Absurd, illogical, nobody would swallow it. Unfortunately, there are some of us who have seen these scripts and of far worse things to come, and we are not laughing. One of the few silver linings to these secret tragedies, or to these recent tragedies, is that maybe, just maybe, people will take seriously, however far-fetched it may seem at first, the prospect that a shadowy, paragovernmental, and transitional entity exists that has kept UFOs secret and is planning a deception and tragedy that will dwarf the events of 9/11. The testimony of hundreds of government, military, and corporate insiders has established this, that UFOs are real, that some are built by our secret black, shadowy government projects, and some are from extraterrestrial civilizations. And our group has kept the secrets so that the technology behind the UFOs can be withheld until the right time. This technology can, and eventually will, replace the need of oil, gas, coal, ionizing nuclear power, and other centralized and highly